My topic will be, I hope, short, and I have another couple of friends, of people who live together, and that is Jerome and Victorinus. Poetovio. Actually, they didn't live together, but they are very often put together because Jerome had it as his noster, and when Jerome wanted to show his special kindness to someone, he adorned him or her with the attribute noster. A few times he also explained it, because noster could mean meus et tuus, so our common whatever. I did a short analysis of the use of the pronoun noster together with the personal names. It's quite often, and I found that there are two groups of people who enjoy this attention by Jerome. The first group are some of his friends, or even common friends. Okay. First group are his friends, to whom he writes letters, or about whom he writes in his letters. And the most often, this adjective appears with Nepotianus and Blesila. It's the outstanding number. They both were dead when he wrote those letters. Nepotianus was also his addressee of the letters, and Blesila, he wrote about her quite often. But these letters, when he wrote the letters 39 and 60, they were epitaphs and consolatory letters, in which he almost canonized them. It was sort of a public canonization. They are saints for him. And that's why they are noster, ours and mine and yours. The second group that he has addressed as nostri are Christian authors. These are sometimes named Ausonius, who is a hardy Christian, then Cyprian of Carthage, Hilary of Poitiers, Lactantius, and then Novatianus, who is also on the margin of orthodoxy, and the same Tertullian, and also at the end Victorinus of Poetovio. He's somehow somewhere out of the line. We found three occurrences that link Victorinus and Hilary of Poitiers. And I think it is not without meaning. Jerome was, there's another way, another person, or rather proper name that is linked with the noster, and that is Bethlehem, Bethlehem noster. So geographical meaning of noster. Jerome was not always an easy character. On the one hand, he was extremely polite and courteous towards his friends, but on the other, he knew to call his opponents also quite heavy names. One of his frequent politesses was the possessive pronoun noster. The first group we mentioned are the friends, the second group are his Christian authors. The our, in this case, could mean simply Latin in comparison, in opposition with the Greek authors, who are not nostri. And or it could be also noster in geographical sense. When Jerome uses the pronoun noster together with the name of his predecessor Victorinus, he surely refers to his sanctity, the same as in case of Nepotianus and Blesila, that sanctity that Victorinus gained through his undoubted martyrdom. Here he is in line with Nepotianus and Blesila. But he is furthermore also one of the very respected Latin authors, Christian authors, the first to offer an exegetical writing, so he's together in the group with other church fathers, and he may be noster, also through the geographic vicinity of their homelands. Let us now continue with Jerome's attitude towards his Victorinus. Victorinus got an average attention in the De Viris Illustribus. We almost have it forward. We can read this one. So this is the text of the De Viris Illustribus of Victorinus, about Victorinus. He is not overlooked, nor overexposed. Beside the admittedly incomplete list of writings, we are informed of his bishopric in Poetovio, of his blessed death as martyr, and we got just one literary evaluation about his not really perfect knowledge of Latin, but at the same time, this critique is mitigated by two praises of his mastering the Greek and of the meaning of his work, opera grandia sensibus, as we heard already by the passage. The general impression that Jerome produces in us is rather positive. Without neglecting or minimizing his defaults, he sings his praises. Victorinus is one of the few Latin Christian authors who deserved reputation in Jerome's quotes. In letters 59 and in letters 59 and 70, Jerome gives an abstract of his illustrious man, but with slightly other insights. Thus, in the letter 58, he informs us about Victorinus' martyrdom and his inability of expressing all that he knew, quod intelligit, eloqui non potest. In letter 70, Jerome clearly defines the reason of his weakness. It is lack of erudition. Licet desit eruditio, tamen non de est eruditionis voluntas. That he wanted to supply, but he obviously could not, due to his situation and different circumstances. Again, Jerome's critique is not merciless, but rather gentle. He mentions him as one of many Origen's translators in Latin. He mentions Hilary, Eusebius of Vercelli, and himself. In Epistle 61, that was the 70. In 61, it says, I say nothing of Victorinus of Poetovio and others who have merely followed and expanded Origen in their explanation of the scriptures. So he knows that Victorinus produced some translations. And in 84, he praises his writings not as mere translations, but as authorial works. Nec dissertiores sumus Hilario, nec fideliores Victorino, qui tractatus eius non ut interpretes, sed auctores proprii operis transferati. So he knew that the translations of Victorinus were not literal translations, but rather paraphrases. He puts him even side by side with Origen himself, saying that there is a Jesus is similar in certain points. Victorinus got admiration from Jerome as the only Latin commentator of Isaiah, but again he could not omit a slight criticism, ipsi imperitus sermone, however again mitigated by comparison with the Apostle Paul, whose autobiographical remark he uses for the Stridonian, non tamen scientia. What moves most astonishment in Jerome's tolerance regarding Victorinus is Victorinus' millenarism or Heliasm. Jerome is known for his low tolerance for heterodoxy, where millennialism belonged in his times. Obviously, this belief enjoyed a special place in Jerome's judgments. In past, it was namely shared by very authoritative persons such as Justin and Irenaeus and Tertullian, one of them being also our Victorinus. As Jerome could not move critique against Irenaeus, so he did not reproach millennialism to Victorinus. He mentioned nevertheless few times and did not cover this Victorinus' default and belief. The other reason for such a careful treatment seems to be that millennialism was not strong, or maybe not even present anymore in Jerome's time. So it did not present any real threat to the orthodoxy, as for example some remains of Arianism still might have persisted. Most commonplace for mentioning Victorinus is list of Christian authors. We find at least 11 lists of them where he is mentioned. 3 times it is about those who explain Apocalypse in a millennial way. 4 times Victorinus is one of 2 authors who are compared in one or the other field. Other occurrences are characterizations of Victorinus as translator of origin 3 times, a martyr with a nice temper, noli nec molitur insidias, Jerome mentions furthermore 2 of his, and quotes 2 of his exegeses. The 2 authors came to closest company when Jerome decides not to write his own commentary of Apocalypse, but just to revise the existing one of Victorinus. In the preface, he explained reasons and methods, especially what regards his millennialism, which was corrected. We really have a chance that at least one manuscript bearing Jerome's introduction about the changements lacks his replacement of the comment of the last chapters, but has Victorinus' original text. So we can, since Hausleiter's edition in GSCL 49 from 1916, check directly what type of millennialism he had. To conclude, we can say without false modesty that we find ourselves in the cradle of Latin exegesis, in the land that saw the first Latin exegete and gave birth to the most prolific Latin exegete. They never met, since half of the century elapsed between the death of the one and the birth of the second. There were many differences between them. The first, who could not afford classic education, still experienced persecution and was martyred. The second, well trained in classics, lived the golden patristic 4th century and got soon the star on the ecclesiastic walk of fame. The first lived in the era of establishing orthodoxy and stabilizing canon. The second is contemporary and colleague of Epiphanius, heresy hunter. Both, however, are scrutators of Bible, transmitting the word from one context to another. Jerome could have judged Victorinus much more severely, not only on the grounds of his literary weakness and lack of formal education, but rather of his questionable belief. But he treats him with an unusual kindness and sympathy. Maybe Jerome, who was so mean with a positive expression about his homeland, here gives at least some reward to his compatriot, giving him this epithet of honor, noster. Thank you.